The conference room on Centralis Prime Station floated in the darkness of space, surrounded by the glow of 1,000 distant stars. Inside, representatives from 47 different worlds sat in silence, watching the display screens with growing horror. Another fleet had fallen, another world had been taken. The Velkans were coming, and nothing seemed able to stop them. Ambassador Kreelan stood at the center of the circular chamber, his 4 eyes dimmed with exhaustion. He had not slept in 3 planetary rotations. None of them had. The Galactic Council, which had maintained peace for 12,000 years, was crumbling. Every strategy they attempted failed. Every fleet they sent was destroyed. The Velkans were simply too strong, too organized, too ruthless. The latest reports scrolled across the screens in cold, clinical language. Colony 7-9, population 12 million. Status, eliminated. Mining operations established. Resistance, none surviving. Kreelan felt sick reading it. 12 million lives gone in a matter of hours. The Velkans did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They came, they conquered, they consumed everything of value, and they moved on. We are losing this war, Council Member Dravek said from his seat. The reptilian diplomats' scales had lost their usual luster. Our fleets cannot match their firepower. Our weapons barely scratch their armor. We are fighting an enemy we do not understand with tactics that do not work. Around the chamber, heads nodded in agreement. The Council had always relied on diplomacy, on trade agreements and mutual cooperation. War was something they studied in history files, a relic of their primitive pasts. Their military forces existed more for show than actual combat. They had forgotten how to truly fight because they had not needed to for thousands of years. Kreelan looked at the tactical displays again. Red markers showed Velkan positions, spreading like a disease across the map. At their current rate of expansion, they would reach the Council's core worlds within 1 standard year. After that, it would be over. 47 civilizations, countless billions of lives, all swept away by a species that saw them as nothing more than resources to be harvested. We must discuss evacuation protocols, someone suggested from the back of the chamber. We can save some of our people, preserve our cultures and knowledge. We can rebuild elsewhere. Rebuild where? Kreelan asked bitterly. The Velkans will not stop at our current borders. They will chase us across the galaxy. There is nowhere to run. The chamber fell silent again. It was the silence of defeat, of civilizations accepting their end. Kreelan felt the weight of it pressing down on him. His people had survived ice ages, solar flares, and civil wars. They had reached for the stars and found friends among them. And now, after all that struggle, all that progress, they were going to be erased from existence by a species that valued nothing but conquest. There is one option we have not discussed. The voice came from the upper tier of the chamber. Chief Scientist Nevrala, a Zethian researcher who had served the Council for 70 years, stood slowly. Her aged frame moved with difficulty, but her mind remained sharp. Every eye turned toward her. We have contacted every member species, she continued. We have called upon every ally, every trade partner, every civilization within communication range. But there is one species we have specifically avoided, one race we deemed too dangerous to contact. Kreelan felt his blood run cold. He knew exactly which species she meant. They all did. It was an unspoken rule of the Council, written into their founding documents. That species was never to be approached, never to be invited, never to be allowed into the galactic community. You cannot mean the humans, Kreelan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Nevrala nodded slowly. I do mean them. The humans of Earth. The chamber erupted. Council members shouted in a dozen different languages, their translation devices struggling to keep up. Some called it madness. Others called it suicide. The humans were quarantined for a reason. They were violent, unpredictable, and dangerous. They had nearly destroyed their own world multiple times before achieving space travel. They had weapons that could crack planets, diseases that could wipe out populations, and a capacity for cruelty that shocked even the most hardened Council observers. They are savages, Dravex hissed. They wage war over land, over resources, over ideological differences so small they are barely measurable. They have killed billions of their own kind in conflicts throughout their history. They celebrate violence in their entertainment. They train their young to fight. They are everything we have evolved beyond. Yes, Nevrala agreed calmly, and that is precisely why we need them. The shouting stopped. Kreelan stared at the old scientist, trying to understand her reasoning. Nevrila walked slowly down to the central platform, her movements deliberate. "We are losing because we have forgotten how to be dangerous," she said. "We have built a civilization based on peace, cooperation, and mutual benefit. These are good things, noble things, but they have made us soft. We negotiate when we should fight. We hesitate when we should strike. We follow rules of engagement that our enemy ignores. The Velkans are predators and we are prey." She turned slowly, looking at each council member in turn. "The humans are predators too. They evolved on a death world where everything tried to kill them. They survived by becoming the most dangerous thing on their planet. They did not achieve peace through enlightenment. They achieved it through mutually assured destruction. They learned to cooperate because they realized they were too dangerous to themselves if they did not." "That is not a recommendation," someone said. "That is a warning." "It is both," Nevrala replied. "The humans are dangerous. They will frighten you. Their methods will disgust you. But they know how to fight wars of extinction. They have done it before, to other species on their world and to themselves. If anyone can stop the Velkans, it is them." Krillin felt torn. Everything in his training, his culture, his very nature, recoiled from the idea of bringing humans into this conflict. They had been quarantined for good reason. The first ships that had observed Earth had returned with reports that seemed like horror stories. Humans who thought nothing of dropping weapons that vaporized cities. Humans who engineered diseases to kill their enemies. Humans who fought wars for generations without ever surrendering. But what choice did they have? The Velkans would not stop. They would not negotiate. They would keep coming until every council species was extinct or enslaved. Was it better to die with their principles intact, or to survive by calling upon monsters to fight monsters? "We need to vote," Krillin said finally. The words felt like poison in his mouth. "All those in favor of contacting the human species and requesting their aid?" Slowly, reluctantly, hands and appendages rose around the chamber. Not all of them, but enough. The council had made its decision. They would call upon humanity, the species they feared most because their fear of the Velkans was greater. As the meeting ended and representatives returned to their ships, Krillin stood alone in the chamber staring at the star maps. Somewhere out there in a quiet corner of the galaxy, humans went about their lives unaware that they were about to be invited into a war that would test everything they were. He hoped they would answer the call. He feared what would happen if they did. The message was prepared that night. It would take weeks to reach human space. In that time, more worlds would fall. More people would die. The council would continue to lose ground, continue to retreat, continue to hope they had made the right choice. The transmission was sent on every frequency humanity monitored. It contained mathematical proofs of peaceful intent, star charts showing the Velkan threat, and a simple message in the primary human language called English. "We need your help. Will you answer?" Krillin watched the signal disappear into the darkness of space, carrying with it the Council's last hope. And in doing so, they had no idea they were about to unleash something far more terrifying than the Velkans could ever be. They were about to unleash humanity. Captain Eric Hayes was reviewing mineral survey data when every alarm on the bridge started screaming at once. His coffee mug jumped in his hand, spilling hot liquid across his uniform. Around him, his crew scrambled to their stations, fingers flying over controls as they tried to identify the threat. "Report," Eric barked, setting down his mug and moving to the center of the bridge. The Aurora Dawn was 3 months into a routine survey mission in the outer territories, far from Earth and far from anything interesting. They were not supposed to be finding anything unusual, and they were definitely not supposed to be triggering every emergency system on the ship. "Incoming transmission, Captain," Lisa Grant said from her position at communications. Her face was pale, her hands shaking slightly as she worked. "It's coming in on every frequency simultaneously. Every single one. Radio, laser, quantum entanglement, frequencies we use, frequencies we don't use, everything." Eric felt his stomach drop. That should not be possible. No human technology could broadcast on that many frequencies at once, which meant this was not human technology. "Is it the quarantine beacon?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. The quarantine beacon at the edge of human space had been silent for 200 years. It was an alien construct that humanity had discovered when they first achieved faster-than-light travel. It broadcast a simple message in every human language. "Stay in your territory. Do not cross this line. You are not ready for what lies beyond." Humanity had obeyed. They had no choice. The beacon made it clear that whoever built it had technology far beyond anything humans possessed. So humanity had stayed home, expanding within their designated area, wondering what was out there and why they were not allowed to see it. "It's not the beacon," Lisa said. "Captain, it's a message." In English. Perfect English, the bridge fell silent. Eric could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. In 2 centuries, the aliens had never spoken to humanity. They had never made contact. They had simply told humans to stay away, and humans had listened. "Play it," Eric said quietly. Lisa's fingers moved across her console. The voice that filled the bridge was strange, with harmonics that no human throat could produce, but the words were clear. "Human vessel, this is Ambassador Creelan of the Galactic Council. We require your assistance in a matter of galactic security. Please respond." Eric stood frozen, his mind racing. The Galactic Council. So there really was a council out there, a group of alien species working together, and they were asking for help. From humans, the species they had locked away like a dangerous animal. "What do we do, Captain?" his first officer, Jake Morrison, asked. The older man had served in the Martian Rebellion, had seen combat on 3 different worlds, and Eric had never seen him look uncertain. He looked uncertain now. "Send a response," Eric said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. "Tell them we're listening." What followed was unlike anything Eric had ever experienced. The alien sent a data package that took 6 hours to download. It contained information that rewrote everything humanity thought they knew about the galaxy. Star charts showing thousands of inhabited worlds. Historical records of civilizations that were ancient when humans were still living in caves. And video footage of something called the Vulcans. Eric watched the videos in his ready room, alone because he did not trust himself to maintain composure in front of his crew. The Vulcans were massive creatures, 8 feet tall and heavily armored. They moved with precision and purpose, and everywhere they went, death followed. Cities burned, ships exploded, populations were herded into camps or simply executed where they stood. The scale of the destruction was beyond anything Eric had seen, and he had seen plenty. The Martian Rebellion had killed 2 million people. The Belt Wars another 5 million. Those had been the bloodiest conflicts in human history. The Vulcans were killing billions. He called a meeting with his senior staff in the conference room. Jake Morrison was there, along with Chief Engineer Sophie Kim, Science Officer Dan Cooper, and Medical Officer Laura Stevens. They had all seen the data. They all knew what the aliens were asking. "They want us to fight their war," Sophie said bluntly. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. "They want us to be their soldiers. Can you blame them?" Dan asked. The young scientist looked excited rather than afraid. "Look at those casualty figures. They're losing entire fleets. Whatever they're doing isn't working." "Because they don't know how to fight," Jake said. He had pulled up tactical displays and was studying them with a professional eye. "Look at their formations. They're trying to fight honorably, matching ship to ship, strength to strength. The Vulcans are just stronger, so the aliens lose. It's that simple. What would you do differently?" Eric asked. Jake's smile was cold and hard. "Everything. If I was fighting this war, I wouldn't play by their rules. I'd hit supply lines, assassination high-value targets, use psychological warfare, target their infrastructure. I'd make them afraid to leave their home worlds." "That's terrorism," Laura said quietly. "That's war," Jake corrected. "Real war. Not the sanitized version these aliens seem to think it is. If you want to win, you do whatever it takes. Humans learned that lesson a long time ago." Eric looked around the table at his officers. They were good people, all of them. They had families back on Earth, lives they had left behind to explore the stars. And now he was asking them to make a choice that could change everything. "If we respond to this, we're committing humanity to an alien war without authorization from Earth Command," he said. "By the time we send a message home and get a response, it will be too late. We have to decide now." "What do you think, Captain?" Sophie asked. Eric had been thinking about nothing else for the past 6 hours. "I think if we don't help them, the Vulcans will eventually come for us. Maybe not this year or next year, but eventually. We're in their path. And I think humanity has spent 200 years locked away, wondering why we weren't good enough to join the galactic community. Now we know they were afraid of us. But maybe that's exactly what they need right now." "Someone to be afraid of," Jake said, nodding slowly. "Someone who knows how to fight dirty." They voted. It was unanimous. The Aurora Dawn changed course, heading for coordinates deep in alien space. Eric sent a message back to the Galactic Council. 3 words, we are coming. He also sent a message home to Earth Command, though it would take weeks to arrive. In it, he explained what they had found and what they had decided to do. He expected to be court-martialed when he got home, assuming he got home at all. But that was a problem for later. For now, they had a war to fight. The journey to Centralis Prime took 3 weeks. Eric spent that time studying everything the aliens had sent them about the Vulcans. Their ships, their tactics, their biology, their culture. Knowledge was a weapon, and Eric intended to be well armed. When they finally dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the coordinates the aliens had provided, Eric's breath caught in his throat. Centralis Prime was beautiful, a massive station orbiting a blue-green world that looked almost like Earth. But the beauty was marred by scars. Debris floated in orbit, the remains of destroyed ships. Sections of the station showed blast damage. "They're hailing us," Lisa said. Audio and visual. "Put them through." The screen flickered and Ambassador Creelan appeared. He was nothing like Eric had imagined. 4 eyes, blue skin, features that were almost elegant. He looked tired and afraid. But when he saw the humans on the screen, something else flickered across his face. Hope, maybe, or fear of a different kind. "Captain Hayes," Creelan said. "Thank you for coming. I confess we were not certain you would." "We're here," Eric said simply. "Tell us what you need." Over the next hour, Creelan explained the situation in detail. The Vulcans, the failed defenses, the desperate state of the Council. Eric listened, asked questions, and made notes. When Creelan finished, Eric sat back in his chair. "With respect, Ambassador, you're losing because you're fighting the wrong war," he said. "You're trying to be civilized when your enemy isn't. That doesn't work. If you want our help, you need to understand that humans don't fight fair. We never have. We're going to do things that will shock you, things that might disgust you, but we'll win." Creelan's 4 eyes studied Eric for a long moment. "We called you here because we were desperate. Because we had no other choice. Do what you must, Captain. Just save our people." Eric nodded slowly. "Then I need to call home. We're going to need more ships." The message went out that same day on a tight beam laser aimed at Earth. Eric knew it would cause chaos when it arrived. Humanity had just been invited to join an alien war. Some would call it an opportunity. Others would call it madness. Eric called it necessary, because whether the people back home knew it or not, humanity was already part of this war. The Vulcans would not stop. They would keep expanding, keep conquering until they ran into human space. Better to fight them now on humanity's terms than wait for them to come knocking. As the Aurora Dawn docked with Centralis Prime Station, Eric looked out at the alien world below and wondered what humanity was about to become. They had been locked away for 200 years, considered too dangerous to join galactic society. Now they were about to show the galaxy exactly why they had been locked away in the first place, and Eric suspected that when this was over, the aliens would have a whole new reason to fear humanity. The monsters were coming, and this time they were on your side. The human fleet arrived at Centralis Prime exactly 23 days after Captain Eric Hayes sent his message home. Ambassador Creelan watched from the observation deck as 43 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, their hulls bearing the insignias of Earth Defense Force. They were smaller than he expected, sleeker, with designs that suggested speed over raw power. This was Earth's answer to the Council's plea for help. 43 ships against a Vulcan armada that numbered in the thousands. Creelan felt hope and despair fighting in his chest. The lead ship was called the New Horizon, a carrier vessel that served as the fleet's command center. Within an hour of arrival, Admiral Kate Bishop requested a meeting with the full council. Creelan arranged it immediately, gathering the representatives in the main conference chamber. When Admiral Bishop materialized on the holographic display, Creelan was struck by how ordinary she looked. She was in her 60s with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, wearing a simple military uniform. Her face was lined with age and experience, and her eyes were sharp and calculating. She did not waste time on pleasantries. "Show me everything," she said. "Every tactical report, every sensor log, every piece of data you have on the Vulcans. I need to see what we're up against." For 2 days, the human delegation studied the information. Creelan assigned council observers to monitor their work, and the reports that came back were troubling. The humans worked with frightening efficiency, analyzing data at speeds that seemed impossible. But it was their discussions that worried him most. They talked casually about acceptable casualty rates. They debated the effectiveness of weapons the Council had banned centuries ago. They discussed concepts like total war, scorched earth tactics, and the deliberate targeting of civilian infrastructure. One human officer suggested using biological weapons specifically designed to target Vulcan physiology. They talk about war crimes the way we discuss weather patterns, one shocked observer reported. They have no concept of civilized warfare. Nevrala, who had been present for many of these discussions, disagreed. They understand civilized warfare perfectly. They simply choose not to practice it when survival is at stake. There is a difference. On the third day, Admiral Bishop presented her assessment to the Council. She stood at the center of the chamber, calm and professional, and proceeded to explain exactly why the Council was losing. Your problem is fundamentally strategic, she began. You're fighting a defensive war against an enemy that has the initiative. Every time they attack, you respond. Every time you respond, you take losses. You're letting them dictate the terms of engagement, and because their military doctrine is more aggressive than yours, they win. She brought up a star map, highlighting Vulcan territory in red. You've been focusing on defending your worlds, which is natural, but that's a losing strategy. The Vulcans have more ships, more resources, and they're willing to accept higher casualties. In a straight fight, they'll grind you down through attrition. What do you suggest? Creelan asked, though he was not sure he wanted to hear the answer. Kate's expression did not change. We stop playing defense. We take the fight to them, hit their supply lines, destroy their resource processing facilities, target their command structure. We make it too expensive for them to continue their advance. That would require entering Vulcan territory, Dravek said, attacking their holdings. They're civilians? Yes. The single word hung in the air. Kate did not elaborate, did not justify, did not apologize. She simply acknowledged the reality of what she was proposing. This violates every convention of civilized warfare, Creelan said, his voice shaking. We do not attack non-military targets. We do not wage war on civilian populations. These principles are fundamental to who we are. Kate nodded slowly. I understand, and I respect those principles. But you need to decide something right now. Do you want to keep your principles and lose the war? Or do you want to win? The chamber erupted in angry voices. Council members shouted in outrage, calling the human proposal barbaric, monstrous, unthinkable. Kate stood calmly in the center of it all, waiting for the storm to pass. It was Nevrala who finally restored order. The old scientist stood and her voice carried authority that silenced the others. Let her finish. We called them here for their expertise. The least we can do is listen. Kate continued as if there had been no interruption. I know this is hard for you, but you need to understand something about humans. We've fought wars like this before, not against aliens, against ourselves. We know how terrible it is. We know the cost, but we also know what happens when you're not willing to do what's necessary. You lose, and when you lose a war of extinction, everyone dies. She changed the display, showing detailed tactical plans. Here's what we're going to do. We'll divide our forces into rapid response groups. Fast ships, heavy weapons, in-and-out strikes. We hit a Vulcan facility, destroy it, and we're gone before they can respond. We'll use their own size against them. Big fleets are slow. They can't react fast enough to catch us. Jake Morrison, standing beside Eric at the edge of the chamber, added his own analysis. We've identified 17 critical nodes in their supply network. Mining operations, fuel refineries, ammunition factories. Take those out and their advance grinds to a halt. They can't wage war without supplies. You're talking about killing thousands of Vulcans, someone said. Millions, probably. Jake agreed. But how many of your people have they killed? How many more will they kill if we don't stop them? The debate raged for hours. Some council members argued for rejecting the human plan entirely. Others suggested modifications, trying to make it more palatable, more civilized. Kate listened to all of it with patience, then shook her head. You can't have it both ways, she said. You can't wage a gentle war. War is brutal and ugly and terrible. The Vulcans understand that. They're willing to do whatever it takes to win. If you're not willing to match that, then you've already lost. The only question is how long it takes for them to finish you off. Creelan felt sick. Everything Kate said made sense from a purely logical standpoint. But accepting it meant abandoning principles that had guided the Council for thousands of years. It meant becoming the kind of species they had always defined themselves in opposition to. It meant becoming like the humans. If we do this, he said slowly, we become monsters. Kate's expression softened slightly. No, you become survivors. There's a difference. Monsters enjoy causing suffering. Survivors do what they must and carry the weight of it afterward.
Trust me, we know.
We've been carrying that weight for our entire history. The vote was close. In the end, 25 species agreed to authorize Kate's plan. 22 refused. It was enough. The operation was approved with one condition. Human forces would bear the primary burden of the offensive strikes. Council species would provide support and logistics, but they would not directly participate in attacks on Vulcan civilian targets. Kate accepted the terms without argument. We'll handle it. But I need one more thing. I need you to authorize the use of kinetic bombardment weapons. The chamber fell silent. Kinetic weapons were banned by every civilized species. They were crude, indiscriminate, and devastating. A single tungsten rod dropped from orbit could release energy equivalent to a nuclear weapon without any of the radiation. They were weapons of mass destruction. No, Krillin said immediately. That is too far. We cannot authorize such weapons. Then we're going to lose a lot more human lives, Kate said. Those weapons are force multipliers. They let us take out hardened targets without putting ground troops at risk. You want us to do the dirty work? Then give us the tools we need. The debate started again, but this time it was shorter. The council members who had voted for the offensive campaign argued that if they were going to do this, they should do it effectively. Refusing to authorize effective weapons while sending humans to die seemed hypocritical. The kinetic weapons were approved. Kate Bishop nodded once, then turned to her staff. Prep the fleet. We launched the first strike in 48 hours. Target is the Vulcan mining colony on Gross. It's relatively isolated, lightly defended, and supplies rare minerals to their shipyards. Taking it out will slow their ship production by 30%. As the meeting ended and the humans began preparing for their operation, Krillin remained in the empty chamber. He stared at the star maps, at the red markers showing Vulcan positions, and wondered if the council had just made a deal with the devil. Neverla found him there an hour later. She sat beside him in silence for a moment before speaking. We did what was necessary, she said. Did we? Krillin asked. Or did we just unleash something worse than the Vulcans? The humans are not monsters, Nevrala said. I have watched them work these past days. They take no joy in what they plan to do. They understand the cost, but they are willing to pay it to save us. That makes them heroes, not monsters. Heroes who kill civilians. Heroes who understand that in a war of extinction there are no civilians, only survivors and the dead. Nevrala stood slowly. The humans did not ask for this war. We brought them into it. Now we must trust them to fight it their way. Krillin watched her leave, then turned back to the displays. In 48 hours, humanity would launch its first strike. The galaxy would learn what humans were capable of when pushed to war. He suspected that lesson would be one the galaxy would never forget. 48 hours later, the Vulcan colony on Gross vanished. 3,000 Vulcans died in the initial bombardment. The facility was reduced to rubble, and across every communication frequency the Vulcans monitored, a message appeared in their language. This is humanity. Leave now or face extinction. The Vulcans had never heard of humanity. They launched an investigation, diverting resources to find out who dared threaten them. While they searched, 2 more facilities disappeared. The war had changed. The hunters had become the hunted, and the Vulcans were about to learn why the Galactic Council had kept humanity locked away for 200 years. It was not to protect the galaxy from humans. It was to protect everyone from what humans became when they went to war. The Vulcan response to the destruction of their mining colony was exactly what Admiral Kate Bishop predicted. They sent 2 full battle groups to hunt down the human ships, massive fleets numbering over 200 vessels. They searched for 3 weeks and found nothing but empty space and more destroyed facilities. Human strike teams moved through Vulcan territory like ghosts. They hit targets deep behind enemy lines, places the Vulcans thought were safe. Fuel depots exploded. Communication relays went dark. Supply convoys simply disappeared. Their cargo scattered across space and their crews dead. Captain Eric Hayes commanded one of the special operations teams aboard a modified stealth corvette called the Ghost Runner. His ship was small, barely large enough for 12 crew members, but it was equipped with experimental cloaking technology that made it nearly invisible to Vulcan sensors. It was perfect for the kind of work they were doing. Their current mission was what the military called a decapitation strike. Their target was War Master Dravik, the strategic genius behind the Velkin advance into Council space. Intelligence reports indicated he was stationed on Velcro 7, an orbital fortress that served as a regional command center. The fortress was heavily defended, with sensor arrays that could detect a ship the size of the Ghost Runner from millions of miles away. So they were not going to use the ship. "Everyone clear on the plan?" Eric asked, looking around at his team. They were gathered in the small briefing room, suited up in combat armor that was designed to operate in zero gravity and hostile atmospheres. These were not regular soldiers. They were special forces operators, people who had spent their entire careers learning how to kill efficiently and quietly. Lieutenant Kelly Price nodded. She was their infiltration specialist, a woman who could slip past security systems that others thought were impenetrable. "We go in during the shift change at hour 23. That's when they cycle the atmosphere in the maintenance sections. Their sensors will be less sensitive for about 15 minutes. That's our window. Once we're in, we move fast," Sergeant Chris Wade added. He was their demolitions expert, a big man with surprisingly gentle hands. "We plant the charges, take out the War Master, and we're gone before anyone knows we were there." "And if something goes wrong?" Eric asked. The team exchanged looks. They all knew the answer. If something went wrong, they probably would not make it back. But that was part of the job. Sometimes saving lives meant being willing to lose your own. "Then we make sure we take Dravik with us," Kelly said simply. Eric nodded. "Good, let's move." The approach to Velcro 7 took 6 hours of careful flying. The Ghost Runner stayed far from normal shipping lanes, using gravitational anomalies and cosmic radiation to mask their signature. When they finally reached the fortress, they parked the ship behind a small asteroid and prepared for the infiltration. The team launched in individual propulsion packs, small devices that looked like oversized backpacks. They moved through space in complete silence, using short bursts of compressed gas to adjust their trajectory. To any observer, they would look like debris or small meteorites, nothing worth investigating. The maintenance access port was exactly where intelligence said it would be. Kelly reached it first, her fingers flying over the control panel. The aliens used a different computer language, but humans had spent the past month learning it. The lock disengaged with a soft click that Eric felt through his gloves rather than heard. They slipped inside, moving through corridors that were built for creatures much larger than humans. The ceilings were 12 feet high and the doors were massive. It made the team look like children sneaking through a giant's house. The fortress was huge, a maze of corridors and chambers that housed over 5,000 Velkins. Finding Dravik in this place should have been impossible, but human intelligence had done their homework. They knew his schedule, his habits, his security protocols. They knew he would be in his command center at hour 23, reviewing the day's tactical reports. They moved through the fortress in silence, their suits dampening sound and masking heat signatures. They passed Velkin workers who never saw them. They avoided security checkpoints by crawling through ventilation systems. They were like shadows, present but invisible. The command center was on the upper levels, protected by multiple security doors and armed guards. Kelly studied the approaches, counting guards and noting their patrol patterns. They changed shifts every 4 hours, and the transition took exactly 3 minutes. During those 3 minutes, there were gaps in the coverage. They waited. Time moved slowly when you were hiding in a ventilation shaft wearing a combat suit. Eric counted his breaths, keeping himself calm and focused. Beside him, Kelly checked her equipment for the 10th time. Chris Wade was perfectly still, his eyes closed, probably running through the demolition plan in his head. The shift change began. Guards moved away from their posts, heading for the break room. New guards approached but had not yet taken their positions. 3 minutes. That was all they had. They moved. Kelly disabled the security door in 8 seconds. The team flowed into the corridor beyond, weapons ready. The command center door was ahead, massive and sealed. This one would take longer to bypass. Chris pulled out a small device, something the engineers called a molecular cutter. It sliced through the door's locking mechanism like butter. The door swung open and they were inside. War Master Dravik was at his tactical display studying ship movements. He was massive, even for a Velkin, standing nearly 9 feet tall with armor that looked like it could stop bullets. He looked up as the humans entered, his multiple eyes widening in surprise. Eric's weapon fired twice. The rounds were subsonic, designed to avoid making noise. They struck Dravik in the head, piercing his armored skull. The War Master fell without making a sound. The other Velkins in the command center died just as quickly. 12 targets, 12 kills, all in under 10 seconds. The team moved with precision that came from years of training and experience. This was what humans did best. This was what had made them so dangerous that the galaxy locked them away. Chris placed charges on the command center's data core while Kelly uploaded a virus into their communication system. The virus would spread throughout Velkin networks, corrupting data and sowing confusion. When they were done, the team retreated the way they came. The charges detonated 17 minutes later, destroying the command center and killing another 30 Velkins who had rushed to investigate the War Master's death. By the time the Velkins realized what had happened, the Ghost Runner was already light years away. Admiral Kate Bishop received Eric's report aboard the New Horizon. She studied it for a moment, then added it to the growing list of successful operations. In the past month, human teams had eliminated 14 high-ranking Velkin commanders. Supply lines were in chaos. Velkin fleets were operating without proper coordination. The Velkins were discovering what it meant to fight an enemy that did not follow the rules. They had built their military doctrine around honorable combat, fleet engagements where strength met strength. They were not prepared for enemies who struck from the shadows, who killed leaders and vanished before anyone could respond. Fear began to spread through Velkin ranks. Commanders started sleeping in different locations each night, afraid that humans would find them. Supply ships demanded heavy escorts, slowing logistics to a crawl. Every shadow, every anomaly on sensors became a potential threat. The Council observers watched all of this unfold with mixed feelings. They were grateful for the results. The Velkin advance had not just stopped but reversed. Territory that had been lost was being reclaimed. Lives were being saved, but the cost troubled them. "They fight without honor," one military advisor said, watching footage of a human ambush that had destroyed a Velkin medical ship. "They attack non-combatants. They use terror as a weapon." Nevrala studied the same footage with different eyes. The medical ship had been carrying wounded soldiers and biological weapons. Intelligence had confirmed it. The humans had not attacked randomly. They had gathered information, identified a target that posed a threat, and eliminated it. "They fight to win," she said quietly. "Honor is a luxury we can afford in peacetime. In war, honor gets you killed." As the weeks passed, the pattern continued. Human strike teams ranged across Velkin territory, hitting targets that seemed impossible to reach. The Velkins tried to adapt, increasing security and changing their procedures. But for every countermeasure they implemented, the humans found a way around it. Captain Eric Hayes and his team completed 17 missions over the next 2 months. They destroyed weapons factories, assassinated military leaders, and disabled communication networks. They lost people along the way. 3 of his original crew did not make it back from their missions. Eric attended their memorial services and then went back to work, because that was what soldiers did. The war was changing. The Velkins, who had seemed unstoppable just months ago, were now on the defensive. Their fleets hesitated before advancing. Their commanders questioned orders. Their supply problems mounted. Admiral Kate Bishop coordinated it all from the New Horizon, moving pieces across the galactic chessboard with precision. She rarely slept, surviving on stimulants and determination. Her staff worried about her health, but she ignored them. There would be time to rest when the war was over. The Velkins made one last attempt to stop the human offensive. They gathered their remaining fleets into a massive armada, over 3,000 ships, and launched a desperate attack on Centralis Prime. If they could destroy the Council's heart, they might still win. Kate saw them coming days before they arrived. She had expected this. Cornered animals always lashed out. She positioned her forces accordingly, spreading them across multiple locations rather than concentrating them. When the Velkin armada arrived at Centralis Prime, they found only a token defense force waiting. The real human fleet hit them from behind, emerging from jump points the Velkins did not know existed. Kinetic weapons rained down on the Velkin ships, massive tungsten rods moving at relativistic speeds. Each impact released energy equivalent to nuclear weapons, punching through armor and tearing ships apart. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Velkin armada was destroyed. Only a few hundred ships escaped, fleeing back toward their home territory. The rest were debris, floating in the void along with the bodies of 200,000 Velkans. The council representatives watched the battle from safe positions, their faces reflecting horror at the scale of destruction. This was war as they had never imagined it. Total, brutal, and terrifyingly effective. Ambassador Kreelan stood on the observation deck of Centralis Prime, staring at the debris field that had been a Velkan fleet. He felt no joy in the victory, only exhaustion and a deep sadness. "They're broken," Nevrala said, joining him. "The Velkans cannot recover from a loss like this. Their military power is spent." "Yes," Kreelan agreed. "But at what cost? What have we become?" Nevrala did not answer immediately. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "We became survivors. The humans showed us how." Outside, human recovery ships moved through the debris searching for survivors. There would not be many. This kind of battle did not leave many survivors. But the humans would search anyway because that was the other side of their nature. They could be brutal and merciless in combat. But they also valued life when the fighting stopped. Kreelan wondered if the galaxy would remember that, or if they would only remember the destruction, the fear, the terrible efficiency of human warfare. The war was not over yet. The Velkans still held their homeworlds, but the tide had turned. For the first time in months, the Council allowed itself to hope. That hope came with a price written in Velkan blood and human sacrifice. Kreelan just hoped it was worth it. 3 months after humanity entered the war, Admiral Kate Bishop stood before the Galactic Council for what she hoped would be the final time. Her uniform was crisp and clean, but she looked tired. The war had aged her. Gray hair had turned white. Lines around her eyes had deepened. She had not slept more than 4 hours a night since arriving at Centralis Prime. The council chamber was full. Representatives from all 47 species had gathered to hear her final assessment. Outside, human ships patrolled the system, ready to respond to any Velkan attack. But there had been no attacks in 3 weeks. The Velkans had retreated to their core systems, licking their wounds and trying to figure out what had gone so catastrophically wrong. Kate brought up the tactical display, showing Velkan territory in red. The red had shrunk dramatically since she first arrived. Dozens of worlds had been reclaimed. Supply lines had been restored. The Council's member species were returning to their homes, beginning the long process of rebuilding. "The Velkan military capacity is effectively destroyed," Kate said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "They've lost over 70% of their fleet. Their supply networks are in shambles. Their command structure is fragmented. They cannot wage offensive war anymore." Relief swept through the chamber. Council members looked at each other with hope they had not felt in months. The nightmare was ending. They had survived. However, Kate continued, and the relief died. They still control their home systems. They still have significant defensive capabilities. And they still have the industrial capacity to rebuild, given time. You have a choice to make now. She changed the display showing Velkan Prime and the surrounding systems. You can accept their current weakened state and hope they learn their lesson. You can establish monitoring systems and defense perimeters, hoping to contain them. You can try to negotiate a peace treaty and trust they'll honor it. Kate paused, meeting the eyes of as many council members as she could. Or you can authorize a final offensive into their core territory and end this permanently. You can remove their capacity to wage war ever again. The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood what she was suggesting. Not just defeating the Velkans, but destroying them as a military power completely. Occupation, forced disarmament. The kind of terms imposed on enemies who could never be trusted again. Ambassador Kreelan felt his 4 hearts beating rapidly. He had known this moment was coming, but he had hoped Kate would not force the issue. What you're describing is conquest. Total military subjugation of an entire species, yes. Again, that single word. No justification, no softening. Just the cold reality of what she was proposing. "We cannot do this," Drevek said, his scales flushing with emotion. "We called you here to save us, not to turn us into conquerors. What you're suggesting goes against everything the Council stands for." Kate nodded slowly. "I know and I understand your hesitation, but you need to ask yourselves a question. What happens in 20 years when the Velkans have rebuilt? What happens when they come back, angry and bitter and determined to finish what they started? Can you live with that uncertainty? Can your children? We could establish treaties, someone suggested. Monitoring stations. Mutual defense agreements. Treaties only work when both sides honor them. Jake Morrison said from his position near Kate. "The Velkans broke every convention of warfare. They showed no mercy to your people. What makes you think they'll honor a treaty?" The debate raged for hours. Some argued for mercy, for showing the Velkans that civilization meant something more than power. Others argued for security, for ensuring the Velkans could never threaten anyone again. The chamber divided along philosophical lines that had existed for thousands of years. It was Navrala who finally asked the question that silenced everyone. "Admiral Bishop, what would humanity do in our position?" Kate was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than before. "We've been in this position before. Multiple times in our history. We've fought wars of extinction against each other. We've faced enemies who would never stop, never surrender, never choose peace." She looked down at her hands, and for the first time since arriving, she showed vulnerability. "I was born on Mars. I grew up during the Martian Rebellion. I watched my city burn. I saw friends and family killed by people who thought they were fighting for freedom. When the war ended, humanity had to decide what to do with the rebels. Some wanted mercy, others wanted vengeance, and what did you choose?" Krillin asked quietly. "Both. We punished the leaders but gave mercy to the followers. We occupied Mars for 10 years, ensuring they couldn't rebel again. We rebuilt their cities and helped them establish a legitimate government. It took a generation, but Mars is now one of humanity's most prosperous colonies. The people who fought against Earth are now our allies." Kate looked up, meeting Krillin's eyes. "But that only worked because humans on both sides wanted peace eventually. The Velkans have shown no indication they want peace. They want conquest. So yes, if I was making this decision for humanity, I would authorize the final offensive. I would ensure the Velkans could never threaten anyone again, and I would live with the guilt of that decision for the rest of my life." The vote took place the following day. It was not unanimous. 17 species voted against the offensive, arguing for containment and monitoring instead. But 30 remained in favor of Kate's plan. It was enough. The Council authorized the final offensive with several conditions. Human forces would lead the assault. Council species would provide support, but would not directly participate in combat operations on Velkan Prime. And most importantly, civilian casualties were to be minimized as much as possible. This was to be a military operation, not genocide. Kate accepted the conditions and began planning immediately. The assault would require careful coordination. Velkan Prime was heavily defended, with orbital platforms, surface weapons, and a remaining fleet of nearly 500 ships. Taking it would be the hardest operation of the war. Captain Eric Hayes received his orders aboard the Ghost Runner. His team would be part of the initial assault, infiltrating the planet's surface to disable key defense systems. It was dangerous work, the kind that got people killed, but it was also necessary. He gathered his crew in the briefing room. They had lost more people over the past 3 months. His original team of 12 was down to 8. The replacements were good, but they were not the same. There was a bond that came from surviving combat together, and it took time to build that. "This is it," Eric said, looking at their faces. "This is what we came here to do. After this, the war is over. The Velkans will surrender and we can all go home." "You really believe that, Captain?" Kelly Price asked. She had survived 17 missions, but each one had taken something from her. She looked older now, harder. "I have to," Eric admitted. "Because if I don't believe we're fighting for something worth this cost, then all of this becomes meaningless." The assault on Velkan Prime began at dawn on a day that would be remembered by every species in the galaxy. 300 human ships entered the system, supported by Council forces that numbered in the thousands. The Velkans met them with everything they had left. The space battle was brutal. Human ships traded fire with Velkan defenders at ranges measured in thousands of miles. Kinetic weapons crossed the void at relativistic speeds. Energy weapons carved through armor. Ships died on both sides, their crews lost in the cold vacuum of space. Eric's team launched during the chaos, riding drop pods through the battle toward the planet's surface. Anti-air fire filled the sky and 3 pods were destroyed before reaching the ground. Eric did not know if his friends were in those pods. He could not afford to think about it. They landed in a manufacturing district far from military installations. The plan called for them to move quickly through the city, reaching the primary defense control center within 2 hours. It was a 15-mile journey through hostile territory. The Velkan civilians they encountered were terrified. They had heard stories about the humans, rumors of monsters that killed without mercy. They ran when they saw Eric's team, hiding in buildings and hoping to be spared. Eric let them go. His mission was military targets, not civilians. He was a soldier, not a murderer. There was a difference, even if it was sometimes hard to see. The Defense Control Center was heavily guarded. Eric's team spent an hour positioning themselves, identifying guards and security measures. When they finally moved, it was with precision born from months of practice. The assault lasted 7 minutes. 20 Velkin guards died defending their post. Eric's team lost 2 people killed by defensive fire. The survivors planted charges on the control systems and retreated as fast as they could. The explosion disabled the planet's orbital defense grid. Human ships immediately took advantage, pushing closer to the surface and eliminating remaining defensive platforms. Without their shields, the Velkin military command was exposed. Admiral Kate Bishop gave them one chance. She broadcast a message on every frequency in the Velkin language. Surrender now. Lay down your weapons and we will show mercy. Continue fighting and we will destroy you. The Velkin government debated for 6 hours while the battle raged. Finally, with their military in ruins and their capital city under bombardment, they agreed. The war was over. The final casualty count was staggering. 4,000 human soldiers dead, 15,000 Velkins killed in the assault on their homeworld, billions more affected by the war across dozens of worlds. The destruction would take decades to repair. Captain Eric Hayes sat in his quarters aboard the Ghost Runner, staring at the names of the crew members he had lost. Good people, all of them. They had come to help aliens they had never met, fighting a war that was not theirs, and they had paid the ultimate price. He wondered if it was worth it. Then he thought about the council species who would not be enslaved or exterminated, the children who would grow up in peace instead of war, the civilizations that would survive because humanity had intervened. Maybe it was worth it. Or maybe that was just what he told himself to sleep at night. Admiral Kate Bishop submitted her final report to both the Galactic Council and Earth Command. In it, she documented every battle, every operation, every decision that had led to victory. She also included casualty figures and a detailed analysis of what the war had cost in lives and resources. At the end, she wrote a personal note. We were asked to do something terrible. We were asked to become monsters, to fight monsters. We did what was necessary, but we must never forget what it cost us. The humans who return from this war are not the same ones who left. They have seen and done things that will haunt them. We owe them our support and our gratitude, but we also owe it to them to remember that war should always be the last option, never the first. The Council's response arrived 3 weeks later. It was brief and formal, but the message was clear. Humanity was granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council. They would serve as the Council's military arm, the force of last resort when all other options failed. Some humans celebrated, others protested. Many, like Eric Hayes, felt conflicted. They had proven themselves capable and worthy, but the price of that proof was written in blood. 5 years later, a new threat emerged in the southern quadrant. A hive mind species called the Skrell began consuming entire star systems. The Council convened, debated, and eventually sent out the call. Commodore Eric Hayes, now commanding a fleet of his own, received the transmission in his ready room. He read it twice, then closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, he activated shipwide communications. All hands, this is the Commodore. We've got another job. Set course for Council space. Looks like they need their monsters again. His crew prepared for departure with practiced efficiency. They knew what was coming. They knew what would be asked of them. And they would do it because that was what humanity had become. The species that did the hard things, the dark things, the necessary things that others could not or would not do. As his ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, Eric wondered about humanity's future. Would they always be the galaxy's soldiers called upon whenever violence was needed? Would they ever be seen as anything more than useful monsters? He did not know. But he knew that somewhere in the galaxy, people were in danger, and humanity would answer the call just as they always had. They would fight. They would bleed. They would win. Because when hope was gone and all other options were exhausted, the galaxy knew there was one species that would never give up, never surrender, never stop fighting for what needed to be fought for. That species was humanity, the most dangerous species in the galaxy, the monsters who protected civilization from the darkness. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what the universe needed.